Wow, Justin. I mean, what can I say to that? Yeah, it's so well done, and you have sort of thrown a monkey wrench into my process here because I'm beginning these I'm beginning these longa level evaluations with deep dives into like enhanced evaluation on getting the scores ready for the stands. But your score is pretty much ready for the stands. Do you know what I mean? I mean, what can I say? How can I improve upon this? Well, there still are a few things to say, but I don't think that there's any need for an enhanced evaluation session, okay? So, probably the best way to approach this is just to give you, like, one of my evaluations that are similar to the dotted brev ones, right? So just kind of going through things section by section, and there probably are a few little tweaks that you could make to this, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't just take this whole this whole score and maybe a teeny bit of proofreading here and there. But yeah, I mean, you've just been really careful about a lot of things, divisi in unison and, marking your entrances, whether it's a first or second player or a duet or whatever. It's just really nothing jumped out at me looking at this as to things that are like necessarily in need of a whole lot of adjusting. I mean, there's one or two things, there's some slurring things and some other stuff, and we'll look over things as we go. But this just really has a professional feeling to it. It it just rings with a lot of confidence and a lot of intelligence. You did a great job on your natural brass here. I would say that like there are a few little things here about like for instance, you can't just say French horn in C, right? It has to be French horn in, or just don't even bother with French horn. But everybody knows what a concert horn is. I would just say horn in F and horn in C basso, right? C basso. You have to tell us it's basso because it could be alto, right? C alto, which is a pretty high little pea shooter of a horn, right? But just kind of looking at your natural trumpet parts. I mean, you're not scoring any pitches that the players can't play, you know. And then you've got a few weird stopped pitches here and there with your F horns and your C horns, but they're allowable. I mean, I threw in a few weird ones too. Just kind of, my scoring was sort of like Beethoven proceeding onwards to Berlioz. I was sort of like in that era where there were a few stop pitches here and there, but the general thrust was on the natural, the harmonic spectrum, the natural open tones wherever possible. So a few F sharps, not a big deal. There are a couple of little missed opportunities that you might want to readjust if you were really to have this performed or rehearsed or read or whatever, which I think, you know, I think this piece deserves it as much as any other in this whole series of evaluations. So look, let's just get started, and we'll just go through sections A, B, C, E, and then jumping back to D. All right, and this is going to be a bit of a shorter evaluation because I mean there's like my general evaluation I think is going to prove true, right, as we go through these pages, that this is pretty much ready to go. Anyway, there's a couple things I think are kind of interesting here, that echo what we just saw in Wayne's score, right? The clarinet in unison with the violins and so on. Interesting to compare. Wayne had his clarinet up to mezzo piano, but you could hear in the mock-up, which is something that I think would be realistic in a live performance, and that is that the clarinet just thickened the first violin line in a beautiful way, right? It didn't necessarily stand out on its own as a solo instrument, right? It was a nice combination here. So, really good slurring pattern here. I would say that here you could do a bit of portato. So like, because you've got this slur here, right? And then like the players or the concertmaster probably would put a slur on this with a portato just so that you get that down, up, down, up, down, up, down kind of thing, right? Now, one little thing you fell into the trap of, and that is, Justin, that you didn't necessarily process what was going on here with this sounding F, right? With the way that Spencer Myer rested his thumb on the F and then played the yada da da dum and did not let go of the F, right? So it's one of those things where it really should have been notated as a quarter note, but I wasn't going to score something inauthentic in the source materials, right? For people to copy paste. So I would just say these Fs here should be quarter notes, just along with everything else, right? And then you have a caesura here. This could also just be a pausa mark, right? Just a little comma or apostrophe in the system text, which I think is good enough because it just gives the conductor will sort of bring everybody to a stop with the tip of the baton, and then just have a slight placement of the next beat, right? I think that's probably what you're going to end up with anyways, and that can be indicated with a pausa. So with that, rather than the caesura, which is really kind of brutal, right? It's a little, it's a bit savage, I would say. Yeah, and this all fits. You are absolutely imitating exactly what the slurring is and so on with the violins, and that's good because it'll really merge much better. One thing that I would mention here is that you could add a little bit of rallentando here. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Do you see what I'm saying? Just like really, really milk it. You know what I mean? Right here in the middle. Yeah. But otherwise, just going back to my evaluation criteria, does the intro set the mood effectively? Yes, it does. And I'll just mention it now that you really stick with strings. Like you have more of a first movement of Beethoven's Sixth kind of approach here, right? So we have the first statement, or we have the opening, the introduction is strings, and then the first statement is in strings, and then the reaction is in strings, and then the you carry on here with the strings. Yeah, ba-dum-bum. You really do keep it very stringy. And here's really our first significant windbreak, right? Yes, you've got a little bit of oboe here, but that's not really the oboe speaking for themselves. It's just a teeny bit of frosting. And then when you come back in, you're in strings again, right? So you really do lean on the strings pretty heavily for a lot of the significant statements. Is that Beethoven or not? It is Beethoven for some particular symphonic scoring, and it isn't for others, right? So it passes muster with me, but we just have to rethink how we would interpret this. So now, the next issue is that opening statement, the main theme. So I would submit to you something, and that is, if you were to have a really even bowing pattern here, right, This is down, this is up, this is down, this is up, and this is a nice long down bow over diminuendo, right? Which is just a natural energy of the bow. Here you have up bow pushing into the end of the crescendo, and that's perfect. So that just leaves you kind of with this problem, right? Up, down, down, or up, right? So just I would say divide this bar into up bow. Oh, sorry, down bow and up bow, right? Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? And that makes perfect sense. Then this can be, if you like, this could be portato, right? Slur with the slur over or under tenuto marks, just to get that kind of sort of, which beautifully blends into the the smooth feeling of the bowing. And then do you really want this to be have no slurs? Do you really want this to be pluck ta 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 ta, and then answered by the cellist ta 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 ta, right? So just I have no problem with it. I'm just saying just a check here, right? To check whether or not you really don't want any slurs here. So just to judge this by the criteria. Does the melody start with elegance? Yes. Is there a natural flow? Mm-hmm. I'd say so. Natural transition to octaves? Yes, you keep it really simple and small. Do you expand without clogging up? Absolutely. Right. So this is just a beautiful strings only interpretation. You just keep it simple, and I think it's incredibly effective. And it's the kind of thing where you allow the strings to establish the the general vibe, and then you start to add little bits and pieces of winds to it and so on. All right. So now we have this lovely low flute scoring, right? And this is like an example of low flute scoring. There's no interruptions anywhere, right? There's no competition from any other instrument. Yeah, a little piano pizzicato on the first violins is not going to interfere with this low E, right? And ta 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 ta. That all works great. Little bits and pieces of pizzicato. That's your harmonic support, just a teeny bit on the end of each phrase. And yes, you contrast with the theme, right? We had clarinet plus violin, which is pretty much a violin sound that sounds thicker and more intense. And then just strings. And then now suddenly you have this beautiful new color of the flute and the bassoon talking to each other. Okay, and then strings react. Da 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 da. And this is really nice. Down, sorry, up, down, up, down. It's a little it's there's a down bow into a crescendo and a up bow out of a crescendo, but that's fine. It doesn't always have to follow the you don't have to go down, up, down, right? Yeah, it all works out good, and it's just a very, very simple, straightforward arrangement. I like this ta ta. Right, we've got you have that separate note right in here. So yeah, does the harmonic density set up the following chorale? Yes, right. Do you manage your dynamics here? Yes, you do, right? So you opt to have a little bit of push right here in the middle, and then coming out of it. I would say it probably would be better to like maybe write mezzo piano diminuendo here, right? So everything is just completely everybody is on the same page here, and the violas aren't inconsequential. So yeah, so mezzo piano diminuendo to piano, and you don't have to mark the rest of the strings. Just a little guide for the violas. right? And then this is really lovely. You just have this, like, do you have a contrast? Yes, you just like add a little bit of winds. Bum, bum, and then da, bum. And then it's really, really cool the way that you go dun, dun. You're sort of adding a little bit of winds here. I miss the fact that we don't really have any doubling on this C here. And I think that just seeing it how cool and like very soft everything is, I think you could bring in first flute here on top of the harmony, right? That way, that we just have a little doubling on this C, I think, is really, really important, right? Just so that the color is spread out throughout the chord. And that takes us to letter B. So yeah, now we have another fresh color here, right? So it's a nice clear solo oboe. Bottom in the clarinets, and then I really love the way that the first violins float into the texture. Isn't this a turn over a trillo? Don't leave out the trillo, okay? And the same thing, don't leave out the leggermente, right? It's like Beethoven said, "Look, I'd like you to be to express agility and lightness and easy virtuosity here. Right? So why not tell these players, right? What's wrong with them knowing that that's what Beethoven wanted, that attitude, that beautiful sense of flash, just like, it's nothing, right? So yeah, put it back in. All right. Right, and then here we get to this, and this is really lovely the way this was spread out. It's exactly right. Right, and and just like this is all really, really, really easy for the players to follow. Right, and then pushing forward here, you're going ta 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 ta. Yeah, that'll all work really, really well. And I really love the way that you just throw in a little bit of color here, right? With your first oboe, first flute, right? And then the same thing here. It's really nice. This is very nicely placed. A really good area for flute and oboe to double, where they're fairly well balanced. The higher it gets, the more the flute is dominant. And the lower it gets, the more the oboe is dominant. But there's this little sort of almost an octave's worth of space right in here, maybe half an octave's worth of space, where the players are, they work really well together. And yeah, just as long as you don't get too far above D, maybe E. Yeah. Now, thinking ahead, like you have the complementary timbre here in the clarinets going into your middle strings here, kind of wending its way downwards, also with the adding the bassoon and so on. So you're sort of thinking ahead, right? Now, one thing that you really missed, and you probably are already thinking about it, and that is the opportunity, to go stopped, open, stopped, open, stopped, open, right? Which would be like, I guess, in this case, horn in F. How would I score it? I would say that like it's G sharp, sounding G sharp to G natural. So this is something that like if you really want these particular pitches, right? This would be D, D an octave lower, and F, right? So basically it's these two pitches right here, right? So you could have one of your you have four horns here, right? Oh, by the way, there's another thing too, is that like your horns, even though they are This one is in F, and this one is in C basso. Right? And don't say so. This is really confusing, Justin. F horn in F, F horn in C. It's like just really avoid the whole French thing. Okay, French horn, just bin it. This is concert music. We know what a concert horn is. There's no need to say French horn. Just say horn in F, horn in C basso. Right? Always tell us if this is C basso or C alto. And the same thing for B flat. Is it B flat alto or B flat basso? Right? If you're dealing with natural horns. So just get rid of the F period horn. It's just horn. Horn in F, horn in C basso. And this is 1 and 2. This is the main point I wanted to make. This is 3 and 4, right? So this would be marked as 3, right? Not as 1. All right. Anyway, so your fourth horn could be going, could be playing this G here. So it would be the written G in the staff. So it could be going G sharp, A, G sharp, G, G sharp, G, G sharp, G. So it's like stop, open, stop, open, stop, open. Right. Because like you have all of these, you have these players a deux, right? And it does, like, you're not using any horns, so you don't really, but you're kind of missing the tension. Like there's that extra edge of tension, and that's probably where Beethoven would use stopped, like a difference between stopped and open, right? And a little note here about triangle, ting, you can't hear it in the mock-up. You're not going to hear it in real life. I would say mark it mezzo piano. It is kind of cool, though. Very cute. Right, and I think that you could have easily started to open up your sound picture a little bit here if you had wanted to. Because as the dynamics start to widen and open up and everything else, and the sound picture starts to get bigger, there definitely is a need to kind of fill things in. This is really kind of a shock chord, the way you just suddenly throw in all the heavy brass here, right? Maybe there's an opportunity here to slowly build towards this chord with more than just the horns, right? And the already existing lower winds. And you might not even need these double bass notes either, right? So, anyways, something I'm not telling you to rewrite it because it's fine the way that it is, but if there's a chance for a rethink, that would be I would say just think about that, all right? But this is all perfectly fine right in here. The way that this is scored, and I love this little trill here in the I do a flutes trill. That's totally fine. And you manage to, the I don't know if people noticed in the mock-up, but the trill was really easy to hear, right? And it didn't really require any other instrument to trill, right? I think this roll could have been a whole note with no problem, right? And then boom, just a little extra emphasis here. Yeah, so very nice, very energetic, beautifully scored, I feel, and you didn't leave a hole in here, and that was the main thing I was worried about with the way that the piano was scored. So really, really great. Now on to section C. Here we get more character here of woodwinds for their own sake, and it's really lovely. It's kind of Brahmsian, clarinets over bassoons, right? Da da. I would say ta ta ta. It's nice. It gives like the to really have like articulations every half bar. It gives more of a shape to the phrasing. Yeah, and just like the little lovely pizzicato 5/1 in the or 5/5/5 if you want to be really technical about it. It's the new 5/1. Yeah, just really lovely. And then oboe over clarinet. Just really lovely, progressing the texture, right? and then the difference between these two chords, right? So like and forte, subito, you know what I mean. That's fine. Ta ta, and then I can see the logic of using subito here because you have this sudden diminuendo down to piano, right? So with the sign that you like to, that you have some of your the connection between some sections of music is like a diminuendo or a crescendo, then really notating that this is subito rather than just, then like, because that prevent the players from accidentally putting in a crescendo here or here, right? So this makes perfect sense. We have this lovely mixed texture of winds and strings, and then just a teeny bit of horn supported or supporting the strings behind them slightly. That totally makes sense. And then when you come back the second time, you progress the texture again, just as Beethoven does. He jumps everything up an octave, right? And so you do the same thing, right? This is something I noticed in a few recent entries, that people were being, just kind of using the same exact octave for these two chords rather than kind of moving it up, which is the way that Beethoven did in his original piano score. Yeah, and then this is really nice. Yeah, a little bit of oboe. You know, I would almost I would almost propose this, Justin, and that, like, if it's possible to give the oboe like a couple of beats, right, rather than just have it just throw in, because it's almost like one of these things where if there's like one beat's worth of a little bit of phrase, it may just not be enough for the oboist to dig in and to, like, the shorter that it is, the more that the more chance there is that the little bit of oboe that gets stuck in there will be will kind of attract attention to itself, because the player doesn't really have enough time to kind of fit into everybody else's phrasing. Do you see what I mean? With the way that this is scored, it's almost as if you might as well have just had your flute connect down here to clarinet, right? So I would say if you're going to throw the oboe in there, then maybe connect here rather than here to the clarinet. Anyways, it's just sort of dramatic and coloristic proportions. And then this, of course, like, is, of course you couldn't throw in your bassoon here. So this is the dovetailing point, the junction. Yeah, and then you've got all of this going on here. Yeah, this all works great. Yeah, and then coming in just with the cello is very simple, good bowing scheme, pizzicato chords alongside horns and lower string. Excuse me, horns and lower winds. So it all just fits in perfectly. I just really love the restraint here, and just the ease at which this goes back into the previous section. Right. So now, let's just keeping to our scheme that I laid down previously. Let's jump back and refresh our memory about how Justin scored the A section, then the B section, and so on, and then jump forwards to the E section to check out the recapitulation, right? So here we had like all strings, right? Little answer with flute and bassoon, with a bit of pizzicato, and the strings coming back in to finish the phrase up. A little bit of support here with our double reeds, right? And and then that gives over to the oboe. We'll get to this when we look at the B section. All right, so jumping forward to E. All right, so here we have a more mixed approach, right? You have decided to take advantage of the kind of natural horn pitches. Da 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 ba ba bum bum. All right, so notice how this fits into the tuning scheme of the natural horns, and I think that this is perfectly fine to go a duet here with these pitches, right? Just so long as that's piano, everybody is holding is holding steady. It's almost a situation where I know a lot of engravers would want to score this, in with separate stems, right? So the there would be split stems here, first pointing up, second pointing down, and so on. Just for clarity's sake. You don't have to do that. This works all right, but it's not like there are engraving standards, right? So for instance, in a situation like this, they would want a split. They'd want the stem up and stem down thing, and then going into this could be either shared stems or split stems. All right, so so just looking at the scoring though, it's a lovely change. Bass trombone giving a little bit of support here. Double basses kind of taking over what the cellos did before. Cellos and violas doing the little yep up 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 up, and then having the bassoons be a lot freer. Da, 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 beautiful mixture of wind timbres right in here, right? Of course, you know that I'm going to ding you here a little bit for scoring the first flute in such a weak place. It's really not going to contribute very much to the sound picture, but then you've got the risk here. If you go flutes a duet, you just get a breathier mixed tone there on with the oboes. But I would say maybe a duet here in your flutes, right? Just to get more of a flute timbre in there. It's not going to make it louder, but it might make it a little bit more, maybe a little clearer, right? And then, of course, this, clarinets and horns together. It's a beautiful combination with the bassoons. Ta, ta, ta. So, when you throw this at me, it makes me wonder, also doubled by violas, it makes me wonder whether or not at the beginning, you might have actually intended or been better off with a slurring pattern that was similar to that. And then this too as well, right? Not that everything has to be uniform, but just keeping in mind that this is going to be very smooth, and then this is going to be ta 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 chuck 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 chuck. It's going to be a little choppier, right? So if you want everything to to be as smooth sounding as possible in terms of just the unity of phrasing, then maybe some slurring here and some slurring back there on those eighth notes in your middle strings. Yeah, but it's just beautiful scoring right in here, and this is so intriguing. After you've had your your obad here of winds with a teeny bit of string support and bass trombone, the strings answer. And then clarinets and bassoons answer, right? So we're still not going into the flute, not until the end here. So are you sure that you wanted to go to go down here to an F, right? It's A in the original. So just I'm not saying this is wrong, but just be aware that it isn't it isn't authentic, or it isn't true to the original score. Maybe this is just you forgot, or maybe it's an idea that you had and you don't even remember that you wanted to change things around. But in the original score, this is an A, right? This is A da 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 A. And seeing as how you don't make any other changes anywhere else to the finishing, the little, finishing the gesture, then maybe this is a mistake, right? Right, and then answering with, first it was first violins to cellos, then it's, of course, clarinets to bassoon, first violins to second violins, and then flute comes back in a different register. So it really just feels like a different instrument, right? Lower high register answered by clarinets. It's really, really lovely. Now, increased dynamic impact is one of my criteria here, and that's just just really like you're ticking all these boxes, building on opening material, but also returning to some approaches, development of material reflecting further contrasts. You tick that box. Increased dynamic impact, yes. Incorporation of new elements, yes. Especially this bass drum down here. Okay, but like, what am I? If you were to thumbnail all of my criteria together, it would be progressing the texture, right? So you really do that beautifully here. Yeah. Ta 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 ta. Yeah. I must wonder if you could have your first violins play an octave higher and just really scorch downwards from that really high E flat. But that's, of course, that's not in it's not the character of Beethoven at all. It isn't his character to jump up the octave very often, though. But whatever, it works. It's fine. Yeah. So you just really, really make this score just really wonderful. This triple octave right in here. And then you emulate that in all these other instruments, and I feel that works really, really well. I don't think it would hurt anything at all for there to be harmony behind these strings in the trumpets, right? Okay, and then this pushes forwards. I must say that you're really conservative with your timpani. There are places where you could be throwing in timpani here and there. But, I don't think it would go outside of the of your period approach to have 3 kettles or 4 kettles even. Yeah, and this is set up beautifully. And look at how I'm just asking everybody out there to notice how Justin really, really kept the focus very direct, like octaves in his strings, along with very nice stacked harmonies in his winds and brass. Very, very much, it is very, very much like an early romantic to, or just romantic era approach in general. And it very, very much maximizes the timbre of the strings, makes you feel that there are more strings playing than there really are, right? Because just the octaves imbue the sound of the winds, especially, and the brass to a slight degree. Yeah, be aware this is going to be very big here. But it's nice scoring for natural trumpets. Just you manage to get a lot out of them. They have a very bright sound. Like natural trumpets. And yet they're not too overbearing, right? That's the wonderful thing about them because of the length of tubing, right, and the use of the higher partials and so on. They aren't horribly bright, right? Yeah, nice high bassoon in here. Yeah, so just wonderful. I could take apart some of these chords, for hours. It would be very, very cool. But just suffice to say, this is very nicely constructed, I feel, and then a little bit of pizzicato, backed up by staccato lower winds, and then just back and forth between these two timbres. It's just very, very nice. Yeah. Bum, bum, bum. Pluck. Or then da da da. And this is such a great Beethoven kind of thing. Bum, da, done. It's very much like the fourth movement of the Third Symphony, which I just think is hilarious. I mean, like if you play that not just as a period work, but if you approach it as if it were written last week, right, or last month, then you just get a lot more out of it. So see, like it's not just like with period music, it's not just like playing with the instruments and trying to obey the particular approaches of that era, but to also approach the sense of anticipation and the sense of freshness and all that other kind of stuff. Those are things that you can't really write down in a manual, right? Or in a blog post. It's something you just have to feel, the feeling of freshness. And like one time I went to a concert, Onyx Quartet in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they performed the Mendelssohn, the first Mendelssohn string quartet, and they played it as if it had been written a month before or a week before, and it sounded so fresh and innovative, even though it was an ancient piece of music, really, a couple hundred years old by now, but but still, it just had that just wonderful sense of newness, right? And because of the way they were playing it, they weren't playing it like, oh yeah, this is a masterpiece, let's put it on a pedestal, or playing it like, oh, look, proving how great we are as musicians and our ability to play this. That was all that stuff was aside. It was just like, wow, this music is so amazing, and just like really, really, getting into that. So that's really where I think that's the best performances of Beethoven's Third are like that, and this reminds me of that a lot. All right, that was a big sidetrack, but anyways, okay, so let's jump back to B, okay, and remind ourselves how Justin scored this. Oboe entrance with a support from clarinets and the push into it from the first violins, the second violins coming in. Right, and then we go to this and so on. At the lower winds climbing down. You're kind of missing the opportunity to go stopped open on these pitches here, but it still works all right. And a little bit of frosting here from flutes and oboes, and middle strings being nicely in the picture. Not really expanding the texture here, but it's all right. And then a big fortissimo tutti here. All right, so that is Justin's approach to B. All right, so now let's go to the recapitulation of B. All right, so here we see that it's flute is the the little fresh thing in here, and this is the same exact approach as before. Put the trillo back in under the turn, right? Ta da da da. It's not ta da da. It's ta da da da. All right, so it's a extra little shake before the turn, and then oboes, being the complementary instrument underneath the flutes. I think that works really, really well. And I appreciate the breaking up the staves into two separate parts. Yeah, and then the clarinets coming in to join and so on, and then things spreading out. All right. Yeah, and then, what is it? It's D flat C, D flat C, D flat C, and that's something that's so easy. You could so easily get on your fourth horn here, right? Fourth horn, not second. And once again, going stop, open, stop, open. So yeah. And you could hold off on these low notes if you wanted to, and instead expand downwards with your texture and your brass, and maybe oboe could be adding on too. Now here you do this real interesting thing, divisi, right? All right, so let's talk about this. Going back to B, like you you dance back and forth between your groups, your first and second violin string groups, right? So I would say that this is perfectly acceptable in that context, right? So I've been saying, look, why don't you just have both of your players, or both, sorry, just go divisi in your, in your first violins and have, like the upper pitches here would be, would be trading off with each other, and then the lower pitches would be trading off. But like in the context of what you did before, I think that this works out really well. And so does this right in here with the flutes coming in to support. And you don't really need, with everything else that's going on, a softer texture with the accents and so on, and in your lower instruments here, you don't really need support on the lower part of the octave. All right. So yeah, and then just like I felt before, I think that there could have been more filling in as you push towards here. So this isn't just such a big shock all of a sudden. Right? Yeah, and see, look, if you've got a full bar roll here, then I think that's also what can be happening before. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Right, and then the trill on the G. It stands out beautifully clearly right on top, and there don't need to be trills throughout the rest of the texture. It's very economical. Now let's jump back to the original conception of C. We remember we had the lower winds sort of talking to each other, a little pizzicato coming in there, and then oboe and clarinets talking to each other, the little mixed wind and string chords, and then little horns coming in there, and then octave higher, bum bum bum, and then we had these very logical like descent here throughout the different winds. I remember I said to just make the oboes go a little longer. Yeah, and all this stuff working out pretty well. Okay, and the pizzicato and the staccato lower winds and horns and so on. All right, so that all worked great. So now going to the recapitulation here, we have flute over clarinet, which I think works really beautifully with the bassoons coming in to kind of support on the end of the phrase. And a little bit of timpani, boom, boom, and that works great with the pizzicato there. And then with the strings answering. Right, I think that's just so nice. And then bum bum bum. Yeah, and this is nice right in here. It's going to be a little patchy. Do going oboe, clarinet? I almost would prefer that you just went oboe. Sorry, clarinet. To flute, right? I think that might just be a little easier on the players, and coloristically a little bit more direct. And then just the way that you stack this up here, adding the horns and the high strings and octaves here and so on, and that works really well. Nice. And then coming back in with the bones, right, under flute, and then trading off to oboe and clarinet. I like these proportions really nicely. And then just the way that the clarinets bounce off of the clarinet bounces off the bassoon. That's really nice. With this other stuff going on in here. Now you don't indicate that this should be pizzicato. I'm wondering if you forgot to put that in, like pizzicato here and staccato there. Yeah, and then just going back and forth between clarinet and bassoon. I think it's such a very cool idea, and it's good. It's good for the players too to like be listening to each other. Ta-da, pluck, or dun. So just in terms of engraving style here, Justin, just like it's kind of I actually find this harder to read. Like if the slur went to near the top of the stem or over the top of the stem, that would just be easier on my brain. Like for instance, like with the here you have the slur closer to the top of the stem. I just feel that that is easier to read, but like when the slurs like really drop down, I mean this is okay, I guess, but yeah, but there are certain things like this just looks, yeah, this just looks a little clumsy to me. Right, a little distracting. And like another thing too is, could you match the smoothness of the melody above by making these repeated pitches here portato, right? Just like so, tenuto marks joined by a slur, right? So that you just sort of have the, you might have the ta 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 ta, and you have the right? That kind of pulsing sound below, and then it matches together. Like when you join those two types of articulation together, then like they seem to be, the portato sort of joins together with the slurred notes above to almost make it feel as if the pitches are slurred even though they're repeating, right? Yeah. And then same thing here. These could be also be portato. Yeah, and these G's and so on. Yeah, and just I love this, the trombones and the middle strings and so on. I think that that works really really well. I think considering the proximity here and the strength of the trombones, I would actually mark them down a little bit, right? Just maybe mezzo piano crescendo to, or piano actually, piano crescendo to mezzo forte down to pianissimo, right? Behind the strings and the trombones. But I still really like the color. Yeah, and then yeah, and this is all really great. Like, and I really like the way that you change the, like you adjust the bowing to where the finger position changes, right? Ta 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 ta. And you could even break the slurs here if you wanted to, just to have more regularity and to be easier on them planning out their bowing. Yeah. Yeah, and then like staccato. I mean, are you sure you want to end it staccato? How did Beethoven end it? I mean, he ended it with staccato, but he was also, it's pretty obvious if you listen to the piano recording. It really is more like accents or almost even marcato, right? So maybe like, just it just feels very abrupt, right? Maybe accents are better. I don't know. Think about it. Yeah, and this is very cool. The double bass part right in here. I think this is something that could be, this could be supported at the octave by bass trombone playing like maybe mezzo forte, right? And then coming in forte at the end of the phrase. Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, so that is that is the all the recapitulations, right? So let's back up to D to finish this off. I almost feel like the little, a little grace note. Da 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 bum bum, C D flat E flat, or C D flat on the little grace notes. Yeah, just to give the players the permission to end the trill as you go up. Right? There's a little. It's almost traditional. You don't even have to mark it in certain periods. But here I would say just considering. In a sense, this is a kind of a neoclassical exercise, right? So maybe put it in. Yeah, and I feel that this all works great. So like, yeah, you just have to say like, you have to ask yourself, I mean, how, considering that this has got some slurs in it, should we possibly add slurs to this bar? Ta ta ta, because we have a slur at the end here, right? Ta ta ta, right, and then we have a slur here. Not slurs in the bass, but maybe slur, slur, and then this a portato. Right. You have a double arco here. You might want to get rid of that second one. Right, and then pick, pluck. All right, now I recommend you go back and listen to Spencer Myer's interpretation of this. Like, he doesn't play this piano, right? Even though technically it would be. He actually pushes into it, right? Sort of, maybe mezzo piano to mezzo forte, da da da, bum 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 bum. Because I feel that the way that this is scored is just very feeble, right? Just like taking the, it's just sort of da 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 ba da da da. Just sort of like, it's kind of like, hey kids, let's go to McDonald's. Let's go to McDonald's, Dad. Do you know what I'm saying? I feel that, if the basses are the parents here, and these are the kids, the bassists, the bass instruments need to get the upper instruments more excited about it, right? And this is all fine, right? The way that this is scored, these octaves and everything. The thing that I miss here is that, like here you've got unmeasured tremolo, but I really miss the yucka, 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 yucka. That just really the, heavy on the elbows, kind of like, the very energetic, like the way that the broken chords are realized in here. I just miss that, and I think that, like, I think it could be something that could add to this, whether it's, maybe the your horns in your horns and trombones could be going cha 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 cha, or maybe your bassoons could be going die. Anyways, or maybe you could just even interpret this a little bit more closely to the original piano part. So there's a bunch of options in here. I think this could just be a little more energetic, right? You might think, well, energetic. What are you talking about, Thomas? It's got this tremolo in here, but the tremolo doesn't. It's static, right? It doesn't have the sense of motion. Yeah, and then subito. Okay, so all right, so you have two approaches here to interpreting Beethoven's little accompaniment figure. This is the right one. This is the wrong one. Okay, so remember I was talking about like engraving standards, and I would say even if you had the second voice jump up here to this, I would still want it to be in two separate voices, and maybe there is no need for the second player to jump up and grab this, right? Because does the pianist really let go of the lower note here, the lower note there, or do we want them to? Right? Anyway, so think about that. Yeah, it's sort of like if you look at the piano score, you can see that Beethoven, first Beethoven scores like this, right, and then he scores like this. So maybe continuing on, with the with the literal transcription of what you're doing is wrong, and maybe like interpreting it in this way is right. Maybe he's just abbreviating from that point onwards, right? And so we shouldn't do the abbreviation. We should flesh it out like this, where the second voice is a full beat. Yeah, and then this is really great. And then you hold off on increasing things, and it just really makes it fall like a hammer blow. And then the flute coming in at the top there. I feel this is very, very strong scoring. I've seen some interpretations where there were some octaves in the horns and so on, or trumpets, and they kind of starting soft and then blazing forth. That might be a period touch that you might want to explore if you were going to do a little bit more editing on this. And then I really love this, how some pitches are staying on the octave, bum, and then dum, bum, right? So we have those full chords by the time we get to the end of it. This really, really nicely realized, and I do like the support here of the bassoons, da da, yeah, and then just like letting go of the octave below. It was really lovely. All right, and then the quick die off here. You might want to die off even quicker. I don't know, but I mean, the mock-up sounded pretty good. I almost feel like the denser and more, the more aggressive the pitch, the quicker it should die off, and the gentler, like the viola's taking a whole bar to die off, or like the strings, right? So maybe a little quicker diminuendo on the brass, and then of course you come in with your horns here, which I thought was great. That's something that I also did. Anyhow, Justin, so that is my evaluation of your score, and I just feel once again very strong, very professional work. And I've gone through the score, and I pointed out some of the really strong stuff in here, and why it works and so on. And I just feel very excited by it. I think it's just like I said, it's pretty much ready to go to the stands. But I put in a few suggestions there. So if you really do decide to try to get this performed, then that would be great. Think of think of the market getting flooded with Beethoven Piano Sonata number 24 orchestrations. But yeah, this is definitely something that is ready to get interpreted, and I think it deserves it. I think it's great work. Once again, I have looked at a few scores of yours by now. I think at least 2 or 3, maybe, and some of the Patreon evaluations, which I want to get started again in the coming year. I just let me get through these evaluations, these orchestration challenge evaluations, and I can free up some brain power. So yeah, so good work, and look, thank you for being a very supportive part of the community, and for being so patient with me. I really appreciate it. Just really was difficult for me to, knowing that I was going to get, both both entries that showed developing orchestrators, testing their imaginations on this, and also professional orchestrators, professional level orchestrators, really exercising their chops on it. That it just made me feel awful to not have the mental acuity and the strength to go through everything. So I'm so glad that I'm finally able to turn that around, and to really look at this stuff. And I hope that too much time hasn't passed, and that it's still useful to everybody. So, and especially a score like this. So, maybe for all I know, you've already gone through all of that, and you've made all of those changes that I suggested in retrospect, and who knows, maybe you even got it played. I don't know, but it would be great if you had. So, but don't just put it in don't just leave it in your files. Put it in a box, I was going to say, but go through it again. See what kind of final editing you can do to it, and print up a copy and put it on yourself at the very least. If not, take it further and see if you can get it performed, or even just like take it to a reading or something. All right, so good work, well done. Hang on, everybody. There is another really great score coming your way, which I think everybody's going to really enjoy on Saturday, and I especially would appreciate it, considering how much this particular member of the community has put into helping everybody out with very kind comments and observations and support. And I would really appreciate it if people would give them back a little bit on their particular evaluation, and have some good comments for them, and some constructive guidance and so on. It's going to be really, really great. So this weekend is going to be really great. That's going to be that one last longer level evaluation of Enrique's, and then that will be followed the next day by the very last of the website subscriber evaluations. Hang on, everyone. It's going to be a terrific weekend and an amazing month to come with all of those full sonata orchestrations, which are going to be really amazing, long, but very richly informative videos. See everybody then.